My friend Elizabeth here is talking about hell, the experience of hell in her system and what that's like. And she's saying the Lyme, the Lyme disease, and the doctor talking about that. And what happens? What does it look like, Elizabeth? Parts come up and say, gosh, this is too much. We got to give up. What are we going to do?
It's a deep dive into FUDville, fear, uncertainty, doubt. A super deep dive into fear, uncertainty, doubt. It just feels like a dark whirlpool I'm going down.
And what are the voices? Just that I love that word, Fudville. That's a new one for me.
Deep dive.
Fear, uncertainty, doubt, a deep dive into Fudville. And for like just for all of us as we start playing together and hey, is it Dermot? Am I getting that right?
You did, Dermot? Yes. Hi. Is this the
Hey,
right time? Is this 3 o'clock in New York now, or 10
this
o'clock?
is this is you're perfect. You're perfect. We got this group here. I'm actually there's just going to be six of us. I'm going to close it, and so we will have an intimate experience today with the six of us. And Elizabeth's just starting to open the door for us today
Okay.
with what she's describing as a visit to Floodville.
Yeah.
Fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Not a visit, a deep dive.
A deep dive. And then, so here's my question for all of us. If it's true that the ever-present sky, our nature is peace, causeless okayness, connectedness, and love, if that's the background, if that's our nature, and that's a question for all of us as well. Like, is that true for your system or whatever your understanding is? That's what we're working with today. But if it's kind of one of the premises of effortless IFS, that that is the sky as our nature, then how do we take ourselves? How do we take our system into an experience of a deep dive of Fudville, of fear, uncertainty, and doubt? How do we get there? How do we do that? And that's going to be my question for Elizabeth. And maybe we'll go around and hear from each of us as far as how do your maybe just a couple like what are maybe two voices inside of you that we would label as parts that that take you to this place. Elizabeth, before she said that, she said there's been an experience of hell. Like, and we don't need to go there. We're not going there together, but just for your own systems, what is it that takes you there? So, Elizabeth, what would be maybe your two primary parts that are able to, if they're succeeding, they're taking you to deep dive into Fudville. What are your parts that do that?
Well, self and presence knows oneness with my higher power and the radical acceptance of everything. So it's a pendulation moment to moment. Self and presence, oneness with my higher power, the radical acceptance of everything, and then the suffering parts in a very scary deep dive to Fudville and pendulating back and forth.
And when you pendulate to Fudville, the deep dive to Fudville, what would be the two voices that help you go there? Is it a God, I don't want this Lyme disease. This is overwhelming. Or what do you find?
It's hopeless is one voice and just total despair is the other.
And it let me do my little housekeeping first before we go further, just since it'll be the six of us and Dermot is new with us. As you know, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm a mediator. And so this isn't the IFS of psychotherapy, kind of friends and colleagues exploring our inner worlds together. And if everyone's good being responsible for their own journeys, can I get a thumbs up from you, please? Thank you. And the other thing is, you'll notice on the screen, I'm recording this. I record all of these, but the only thing that would ever be shared would be my square. However, the audio that you speak during this could be shared because I'm wanting to make this available and I make it all available for free for anyone else who's interested in what we're exploring. But this is different than IFS groups and other groups that we don't go so deeply into the stories. Like we try to get the voices of what's being longed for, and then we help our system find that that self is here, that what's being longed for can be found from our very nature. And at the same time, if something is said today and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that, just let me know at the end and I'll delete it. But it's a bit of a pain in the butt, but I got it covered. If everybody's good with that, could I get a thumbs up, please? All right, thank you. And so back to Elizabeth has two parts. She said there's a hopeless part and a despair, a voice of hopelessness and despair. And when we hear that, Elizabeth, if you'd like to, would you give us maybe a little flavor of each of those voices, like the hopelessness and the despair, just so that we can find our own version?
So there's a felt sense with hopelessness and despair. There's a felt sense, a very visceral felt sense of I've gone down into darkness. There's like a dark, dirty whirlpool that goes around, and I've going down the dark, gray, dirty whirlpool. There's a felt sense of downness, physically going lower and collapsing down, sucked into that dirty, yucky, gray whirlpool. Or do you want more the
No,
actual words?
that's beautiful. So for all of us, when we hear of that experience of hopelessness, being kind of sucked down into this dirty whirlpool, what does that evoke from us towards Elizabeth and towards this part of her that's experiencing? Can you find an endearment, a compassion towards that, towards Elizabeth, towards that part of her that's experiencing hopelessness? Wonderful. And then there's a despair part. And what's the voice of that despair part, Elizabeth? What does it say?
It's like, I just can never get any help. I can't move forward. It's getting worse. And this is so scary and alone.
Wonderful. Thank you. So as we hear that voice of despair, can't get any help, getting worse, alone. Notice, and so this is a part in Elizabeth. And by the way, Elizabeth, where do you hear that part? Do you have a sense of, like, do you hear it in front of you, in the head, or do you just feel it, a contraction in the stomach? Where is that located?
On the left side of my lower belly, with a very strong downward energy and like a collapse down.
Collapsing down, despair, scary, can't get help, can't move forward, getting worse, this is scary, I'm alone. So as you hear that, as we hear this part in Elizabeth, are we judging it? Are we making it wrong? Or is there just endearment towards it? Oh, wow. That sounds scary, alone, difficult, harsh. And then, but my question for all of us is, what's most like that part that you know in yourself? Or where's the resonance with despair? Can you find that part in your system? And we don't have to do anything to go there, almost like a piano key. The tune plays, the tone plays, and there's a resonance with despair. Like, I know that. And then, just as you found endearment towards this part in Elizabeth, can you find the same endearment in your system? One of the premises of IFS is that there are no bad parts. Everything that arises in us is there to serve us. It's doing its best. Notice that there can be endearment for that voice in your system. It's like, this is too much. It's getting worse. I don't know what to do. I'm alone. Can you find a tenderness towards that voice, possibly a love towards it? And for all of us, just notice what comes up as we're playing in parts land. As we're doing this, maybe there's a part that's like, gosh, that we just tuned on and you're taking us into FUD land. It's please and despair and hopelessness. Just, that's a lot. Maybe there's a part that's like, I wanted to come here for the bliss, for the beingness, for the the connectedness. And just notice that part, the dear part that's like, this isn't fun. I want something different. Whatever's coming up in your system, that's what we're interested in. And Elizabeth, how is this for you? How are you doing, having kind of exposed both the sense of this pendulation that happens in your system from the oneness with a higher power, self and presence, radical acceptance of everything, which the treat is we have Elizabeth here. You'll get to know that she knows this intimately, the self, as she just described. And there's also this intimacy with the way life is moving in time in her system as this hopelessness and despair. What's this like for you now, Elizabeth?
This is a word I never use, and I didn't use it, but I'm going to say it, but I never used it. There is trust that in this form is where I learn, I get more self energy to say, welcome, welcome, hello, hello to these parts. Even though I don't use that word trust, I'm using it now, but for the record, I never used it.
Thank you. And so for all of us, as we hear Elizabeth say that word trust, where does that go in your system? And who is it that's trusting? Who is it that's finding more trust? Who is it that's finding more trust? And can you find that some aspects of you are like, yeah, I know that the sky is always here. I know that always that love is always here, that okayness is here. And there's a sense of trust there. Then other parts are like, what are you talking about? This is scary. This is the despair and hopelessness. There's nothing to trust here. How does that play in your system? And lastly, is it okay that that's how things are for us? Is it okay that there are parts that are like, yeah, everything's great, let's dance, everything's great, and other parts are like, this is scary as hell, and this is never going to be okay, and they talk about self-leadership and resting in these beautiful words Elizabeth described of this oneness with the higher power, the self and presence, the radical acceptance parts that will be like, I'm never going to know that. Is that okay? All right. Any final words, Elizabeth, before we kind of keep moving? All right. Well, welcome everybody. That was our light intro. And then for my question for each of us is how are you? How are you after that? How are you as we land here together? How are you? And can we find multiple answers that arise to that question? Maybe the how are you? Maybe there's just the self here. Maybe there's just, oh, there's presence, there's love, there's connectedness, there's okayness here. There's being, there's flow. And then also, we might notice some voices or some sensations. I don't know, there's confusion, there's analyzing, there's criticism. Sid should be doing something different, or my system should be more like that radical acceptance that Elizabeth describes, or there's a pusher, a spiritual. Often, I'm sure we all have these spiritual achievers because we're here. Some of us, I mean, Deborah's been doing this for a long time. It's like spiritual achiever. Like what shows up when it's a how are you? And before we go to whoever we're going to next to see what their land is looking like, if it's fun land or if it's bliss land or love land, any comments, anything's bubbling, anything that's wanting to be shared as we begin? Yeah, Deborah.
Yeah, I do. It's the first time I've heard a voice apart say like a mothering quality, like it's okay, like a super comforting like adult there. I mean, I'm not sure, is it the self leader that you call in IFS? That's one term I'm not that familiar with. Like like, I feel like it's funny. Can I just go on? Yeah. So Elizabeth, I woke up like 4:30, which is or like 3 or 4 with my fear thing, and it showed up today. So what you're talking about totally resonates with me. And in the middle of the night, I'm like, no, not now. It's not a place I feel confident, but so I was feeling the fear and the aloneness. So it totally resonated with me this morning. But what I'm feeling now too is the acceptance of that, and it kind of manifested as and I'm trying to find the like whys, and I realize that's not helpful. Just go with the feelings. Is that right, Sid? Like, oh, maybe it was when my parents got, blah, blah, blah. But I've had this rash and I thought it was gone, and it started itching in the night, and I go, something's wrong. That's my sentence. Something's wrong. So that's the the part that's always looking for danger. And it says, oh, something's wrong. There's the itch is back. And then the fear helplessness came in, and I let it just be there. And I could feel it like increasing. The itchiness came up all around my hairline, on my neck, on my wrists. And I was like, and it's been there before. So I'm like, why on my wrist? But anyway,
Let me ask you
yeah,
a couple questions, Deborah.
yeah,
Let me
yeah,
just
yeah.
because it's just there's so much, and part of the game here that we enjoy is that there are like 6 of us co-creating and 6 of
Oh
us
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
leading each other in, like what Deborah just like. No, I want to keep going with where you're leading us, Deborah, just like Elizabeth did. And a couple questions. First thing you brought up, Deborah, was there was there was something kind of a maternalness, a motherly quality that was here. And so for that, like this maternal love, this nurture, this care, this being held, for each of us, what's most like that as a quality of what we call your being of self, of the quality of this very causeless nature that's just here, kind of acceptance, this love, this nurture, kind of a maternal, a feminine flavor. You could say it, a feminine flavor of beingness. And then can we also find a part, kind of more of a doer that's there? It's like, oh, there's compassion, there's care, there's love, and it's more of a doing as a part. And we celebrate both of those, but it's really interesting in this game to see if we can discern it, because the flavor of the maternal that's of self, the parts can start to use Elizabeth's word of trust. They can start to trust when they get to know it, that, wow, it doesn't come and go. It's just here. It is Deborah. Deborah is maternal love. Debbie is maternal love. Mary is. Dermot is. Elizabeth is. Sid is. And let me just pause here and just say, how's that for everyone? Any comments on that as far as maternal love in your system before we continue with Deborah's path that she's taking us on? Can we find it? Let me ask, can you find it as self? Let me get a thumbs up if you can find it, and you know it as a quality of your beingness, or maybe so.
I'm going to
Debbie's
say,
got something.
Oh.
Yeah, Mary?
no, go ahead, Debbie. That's fine.
Oh, I was just putting my thumb up. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead. I put my hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's interesting, that label, because I never really felt loved by my mother, which may or may not be true, but at any rate, my sense of it. And so that the love, the compassion, the nurturer is there. That label, I'm going to have to ponder that label. So thank you for introducing that.
How about your system, Dermot? Was it like, yeah, I can find that, or mine's more masculine, more like clarity and peace and
Exactly.
emptiness?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm working with trying to parent my inner child at the moment, but it's more fatherly, or adult man to boy to child.
Mhm.
So maternal love is yeah, it's just unfamiliar. So it's taking a bit of, it's taking a bit of adjustment to see if that can be there in me too. And of course it can, but yeah, it's really helpful to, see that yeah, that's probably part of me too and needs to be brought in. And of course, I have my own issues with having a loving maternal figure, a bit like Mary, having not really felt I got that much as a child. So that sort of makes it even harder to bring it in.
We're lucky today that we have Deborah here, and that we're gonna we could get to we all perhaps could get to find that maternal love through just that tuning fork with her system to see if if we find a resonance with it. And let's do this before we dive further into what Deborah said. Let me just ask each of us, like, what would be the right now? What's the just maybe it'll help it just for connection and for a sense of all being in this together. What would be your one word of how beingness is here for you right now? Like in Dermot, we're hearing it's more of a masculine flavor. Like for each of us, what would your word be? Like, is it clarity, silence, stillness? Is it like Elizabeth's sense of presence, radical acceptance? Is it more flow? Is it more connectedness, emptiness, nurture, compassion, love, tenderness? What's your word right now for this beingness, for this self, whatever you call it? Let's just go around and let me just, Dermot, if there was one word for it for you, what would you say?
Well, at the moment, it would be connectedness because I'm in this group. So that's what's here.
Thank you. Mary.
Right now, it's just okayness, but not in a like meh, okay, like everything's okay, it's all good kind of thing. So okayness, just yeah.
Or before we go further, those two, Dermot's connectedness. As we hear that, what's most like connectedness that's here for each of us? And if that word doesn't really land, connectedness doesn't really land, maybe there can be a tuning into Dermot and see if he can like just somatically, if that can help us find it, connectedness. Connectedness. And then Mary, okayness. What's that for you? What is okayness? And then can we touch causeless okayness? Like it's not conditional on experience. And I think that's what Mary was pointing to as we see her nodding. It's just here. And does that okayness, does it have more of a masculine or more of a feminine feel? Or like that doesn't even work. It doesn't even translate, this okayness. Oop, Mary, I'm sorry, you were muted. Were you saying something?
I was just talking to myself. I've never thought about it in gender and where it's a masculine or feminine, so I don't know, but it's a great question.
Okayness, like can we touch that? And for some of us, it's like okayness, that's too big of a word. It's more like there's a presence here, and in that there's okayness. Where do we find a sense of okayness that's causelessly here? All right, Debbie, what's your word?
I would say I resonate with connectedness a lot and okayness. And I just do have this little part that goes causeless. Like for me, I do have to, there is some, well, anyhow, to get there, it's not causeless. Like it's not that I have to be around people, but I'm sorry, I could talk about that later, but it is like, there is some shift. I think for all of us, it must be. It's not like, well, unless you're totally awake, there has to be a little shift in my habitual little, patterns that I have going on. Does that resonate with
Oh,
anyone? Or is it just
yes.
me?
And if it doesn't resonate yet, see if you can find it. See if there's some circumstances that help you get to know like this connectedness that Dermot's speaking of, this okayness of Mary. Like sometimes, oh, the clouds need to clear a little bit. Wow, I need to just take a breath.
Mhm.
I need to feel my body. And that helps me, it helps it become clearer, this self, this background, this beingness. Like for each of us, what's that? What is it? If there's a little something, like Debbie and I often speak about connectedness and how when we're in a group, it helps us get to know that piece of connectedness that's here. Thanks, Debbie.
Thank
Elizabeth, what's your word?
Oneness.
Can you tell us, like, we could all go to different places with oneness. Give us a little bit more of what this oneness experience is.
Oneness with my higher power, whether I'm experiencing it at the moment or not, there is oneness. That's the absolute truth of authentic self and true self and self and presence.
And so what's that like? How do you know that there's oneness here? Is there a sense of, wow, there's openness, there's spaciousness, there's love, there's connectedness, there's no problem. What do you find in oneness?
Nothing like that. There's no false sense, but I know it's true under the clouds. And so I looked for that experience, whether I can viscerally feel it or not.
And so
I
it's
affirm
more,
that experience.
but the oneness would be more, there's just an absolute clarity and knowing it's like more of a knowing.
Yes, a faith. Yes, a faith that that is true, whether I feel it or not.
So how about that for us? Often in the kind of the self-realization speakers, they'll use words like knowing. There's a knowing, there's an awareness, there's a clarity of this. For all of us, what's your word? How does that translate for you, the knowing? In Elizabeth, it's a oneness. There's a knowing that there's a oneness. There's a clarity that that's here beneath the clouds. How does your system know that? How's that real for you? Okay, then we can go back to Deborah, see where she's taking us. But first, Deborah, what's your word? What would your word be?
I would say caring or tenderness.
Thank you. That is in the theme of the maternal quality, the mothering quality of beingness. Caring, tenderness. What's most like caring, tenderness that's here now in each of us? Is there anything you have to do for it to be here? Now, this is not disagreeing with what Debbie was saying, and what Debbie was, from what I was understanding with Debbie, there's certain circumstances that help and kind of clear the sky or clear the clouds move, and then we discovered that it's here. But for it to be here, in the background, just like Elizabeth was pointing to, the sense of knowing, for caring and tenderness to be here, is it possible that it's just our nature behind the sky, behind the clouds? And then again, what's most like it that's here now? And how do you know caring or tenderness is here? What's the somatic experience of caring and tenderness? And I think as we could kind of tune into the space that we're in together as we're all exploring it. Tenderness. The last question. Does your system like this? The parts that arise, what arises in you? That we label them as parts, these voices, these expressions, anything that wants. that's looking for fulfillment. What's it like when it's met by tenderness and caring? Is there like, oh, I like that. That's good. Or maybe if you were asked your system, as if you could see like all these aspects, all these parts of you, it's like a party, all these parts are hanging out. Yes. So who likes tenderness? Who wants caring and tenderness? And see who raises their hands. That's what we're exploring, right? Is how we're like welcoming everything home. It's like, what do these aspects of us want and need to find fulfillment here in us? And sometimes the Buddhists, they often won't go here. They'll just say there's just equanimity is the flavor of this, or it's emptiness, or it's the absolute. But for these very human aspects of us, like the absolute, that doesn't give me anything. What do I get from that? But when we can find these qualities of tenderness here, then it's like, oh, tenderness, I like that. That's why I'm with my girlfriend. That's why I'm doing this, to find this tenderness, this love and acceptance. And another one of these premises of IFS, they call it the attachment. This is where it goes into psychology. Like, where do we find our attachments? Where do we find this fulfillment? Where do we find this tenderness? And the idea is that our primary source of it could be right here in self. And then secondarily, we can find it from the world, from the beautiful people in our lives. How are we doing, Deborah?
Yeah, so good. Yeah, it's so comforting to be here, right? The resonance with everyone here and just the humanness and the. It's funny, I was thinking, because I have no mothering, I'm not a mother, I was not mothered at all. The fact that it showed up, I was thinking I have to go cut my fingernails so I don't scratch myself, but I imagined me doing it to a child, right? Like I was gonna cut my child's fingernails, like such a caring thing, right? And I was like, I do have that. I have that for myself, right? I never have thought a mothering thought for myself. So a competent part, right? I think it's been too scary. And I think when I lie there afraid, there's not really been a part that stepped up to like say, it's okay. You know, I have to try really hard to say the words, but I don't feel it. But it's the first time where I'm having that sense of a part that's stepping up.
Yes, when we wake up, as Deborah was beautifully describing for us what she found at 4 o'clock this morning, this fear, the aloneness, the helplessness. Okay, we all know this. We wake up like, we wake up with this. And then the question is, what is it being met by? Like Deborah in your system and all of our systems, these words Deborah used. Elizabeth had different words for this, but Deborah is this fear, this aloneness, this helplessness. When we wake up with a part, let's just say there's the loudest part that's speaking that, the loudest voice of fear, aloneness, helplessness. When we hear that, first, can you find a part that would speak some of that in your system? Like, where do you hear that? Is it in your head? Is it in front of you? What's the tone of the voice? And then the big question is, what is it being met by? When there's contraction, when there's lack, when there's want in our system, this fear, this aloneness, this helplessness, what is it being met by? Is it being met by like a therapist part? Like, oh, we've all read the books. Is it being met by a therapist part? It's, oh, I can help. I know what to do. You need to do this, or I need to give you compassion, or you just need to be quiet because we need to go back to sleep. Is it being met by a therapist? Is it being met by a part? Or maybe it's a critic part. Like, why is this happening at 4 a.m? Is it being met by a part? Or is it being met by what we call self from beingness? And that could be just presence. It could be Dharma, it's more clarity, more masculine, or it could be more like Deborah's sense of, oh, there's tenderness here. It's being met by tenderness. I go back to Deborah. How's this for everybody? Let's just go around real fast, just as far as what's your part being met with? Anything that comes up for you with that? Elizabeth, anything?
Well, for maybe later on, I would like maybe some teachings or guidance about how I can further welcome and celebrate these parts that are in a deep fear. I say welcome and I say welcome, and but you have great teachings about seeing these parts as wonderful, and I love that.
Great. Let's see if that's just one of our themes as we go around and each of us share and we're with each other. Thank you, Elizabeth, and we'll keep clarifying, keep asking whatever's there where you want to. Can we all see this as a celebration? Whatever is shared, like Elizabeth says, oh, I want to be able to welcome my parts more. I want to be able to celebrate and appreciate my parts more. And that up, Dermot, what are you finding? How are you doing with this?
Yeah, I am. It's taking me to my own, fears and my responses. What's it being met by? To be honest, is often alarm. Can I, what do I do with this frightened, lonely child part? Not sure that I know how to help it. It's a big issue. Sensing maybe we can find that here. I don't know.
Thank you. We all can relate to that, right? We feel the frightened, the helplessness, the aloneness. What can I do for this part? It's so precious, that part, that voice that comes up that wants to help. And then one thing we're playing with is just that discernment between the part that's helping and the space here, the beingness, the home that's intrinsically here, that, as Elizabeth's pointing to, that just welcomes. And that's going to keep playing with that discernment. Thank you, Dermot. Mary, how's it going?
It's good. I'm really intrigued by this mother part. There's confusion because I never labeled anything a mother within myself. And so for that to be introduced, just fabulous. And so now I'm trying to analyze it and I'm confused because is that a part that's, more evolved, or is it just another term that's, another aspect of the beingness. So there's just a little confusion but it's just a lovely thought, because I don't have children. I had stepchildren, but not anymore. And I didn't kill them off. They just don't live with me. So anyway, I didn't have children because I didn't feel like I had the tools. So anyway, it's just an interesting, process. So I'm thrilled. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. I didn't kill them off. And so part of my intention is that when we're together, it just gets to be lightness. It gets to be like we're playing together, because it gets so tiring, right? Our spiritual achiever. I've got to heal my system. I need to find how self is welcoming everything. There's so much I need to do. I need to read another 10 books. And so we can be together and see what happens in this, and get to touch this as we see Mary's innocence and openness. There's like, oh, just like as we all fall in love with Mary and her in this. And then if we can do that, that's part of the game that opens, like this love that opens. Because as we find this love towards each other's parts, and I always say this, I find it for many of us, it's much easier to find endearment and love towards other parts than towards our own. And if we can define that towards others, and then we can find the endearment and acceptance of, oh my God, there's loneliness, there's helplessness here, there's fear. And endearment is evoked by that, a sense of welcoming, a care, a nurture, a tenderness. Everything changes. It's like when that is evoked, and that's what welcomes the part, or more of a masculine from Dermot, there's just a sense of clarity, understanding, peace here. In contrast to the part that comes in that tries to fix it and help. And we love that we have these parts that come and help too, but it's a very different response inside. Debbie, what's going on with you? How's it going? Before we go back to Deborah, how's all this going? It's a lot.
Good. It's good. Yeah, Mary, that was very funny. Let's see. I guess a part of me wants to clarify that, like, when I was talking about effort, it's not so much external, like, I mean, a little external for sure, but it's more like for me, because of my system being kind of revved up all the time, it's really like, doing some somatic, like breathing or eye movements or, something to calm my system. So because there's no way I can access a sense of self when I'm in this somatically a fight or flight state.
Yes.
So that's what I wanted to clarify. And it is, of course, doing like yoga or being around people, but it's more like the internal.
Wonderful. And so how about Debbie when Debbie says if I'm in a fight or flight state, fight or flight, like for each of us, like what's the part that fights? What's our part? What's the one that steps forward first and fights? And the part that flights, like we got to get out of here. We often call them firefighters, both of these in IFS. They're just like, we got to fight, we got to get out, we got to fix this problem. It's too much. And can we all relate to Debbie? If we got a fight or flight going on, it's very hard to find Desmond's connectedness or Mary's okayness or Deborah's tenderness. We're in fight or flight. And just how does that play in each of us, the fight or flight? And when we heard it in Debbie, fight or flight, like we could ask her more, but we won't do that right now. But with the fight or flight, the parts, could we find endearment towards her part that's fighting, that feels like it needs to fight, needs to protect, needs to take care of Debbie? Or flight, this is too much, I need to get away. Can we find endearment towards her parts that would do that? And can we find that for our own, this endearment for these parts? And one last thing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Debbie, sorry.
Okay. Also, maybe a little how I see things. It's my parts. For me, it's my nervous system. It's not so much parts, but it's how my parts react to it. Like, oh, this isn't okay. What is wrong with you? You should be different parts. So that's where I kind of differ from IFS that yes, I have my nervous system is getting revved up extremely easily, but then my parts don't like it because they were told it's not okay. So that's just my little tweak with it. And it's really been helpful to realize that when well-meaning IFS facilitators say their parts, not always. Sometimes people's nervous systems are just different.
So how about that? Can we all relate to a sensitive nervous system? Like some of us can be around loud noises and others of us around loud noises like, oh my gosh, a scratching of a chalkboard or a background sound or the TV's always on. And for some of us, it drives us crazy and others it not. The nervous system that's more sensitive. But here's my question. A sensitive nervous system, where's the problem?
It's just with my parts. There's
There we go. And
because I was taught that this was not okay.
Yes. And it's like, okay, I have a sensitive nervous system. Great. But parts, just like Debbie's saying, one's like, oh, this is a problem. It shouldn't be this way. I should be different.
Why are you this way? And yeah.
There's just how about that? There's a bigger thing she's touching on here. Like, is the problem like the experience, or is the problem the you know, as we notice the parts, let's say something needs to change, it needs to be different. Let's do a really short, let's do a short dive because I want to have plenty of time where we can go in deeply with Dermot, Mary, and Debbie with this too, and we have more with Deborah, but let's just do a really short one if that's how about that? Anything bubbling, anything else bubbling before we do like a 5-10 minute little thing together and then we'll go back. Anything bubbling, anybody?
I just really love how Debbie articulated something that I really relate to, but I wouldn't have been able to put into words. It was so helpful to hear that articulated.
Let's just, and if it helps, some people close their eyes and keep them open. Let's just notice what's here. Let's just notice what's here. As we notice, what are the loudest voices that are here? What are the loudest parts that are here right now in your system? It's an understanding part. Maybe it's a skeptic part, like, yeah, this works in the workshop, but in real life, maybe it's a critic part. You should do something different. You should be more like Elizabeth's acceptance or what Debbie's describing. Maybe it's a pusher. What are the voices? What are your loudest parts? And then let's see, in Effortless IFS, we call it, it's our first view, and we call it riding the bike of being. Let's see if we can be aware of those parts, but they're just kind of, we're aware of them, but our attention is really on the beingness. And now how is beingness showing up for you? Is it connectedness, okayness, tenderness, this knowing of oneness, flow, ease, or more like presence, awareness, calmness? What is beingness for you right now? And then, like, as we learned how to ride a bike, we found balance. There's a sense of, can you find balance as that being? Can you abide? As that quality, as these qualities. Like a bike, and then as you notice, like you're riding a bike and it starts to tilt, same thing. You're riding the bike and you start to hear a part, oh, I should do something different. And you like start to tilt. You notice that, and then it just comes back to self. It comes back to peace, comes back to abiding. See if you can find that, the resting, the abiding. Yes. We're abiding. And we feel the pull of a part, hear the voice. Maybe we start to blend a little bit and something just knows to discern, come back to self. We're just going to do 3 views real quickly here. This is the first view. This is the discernment. This is where we kind of have a loving indifference towards the parts. We're aware of them, but we're just focused on self. And this is where this is very helpful, because at any time we can, this is the idea of being able to find sanctuary, being able to find peace, being able to find a sense of home and just coming back to it. Some people call it like stepping back. This is what Byron Katie does with her inquiry. Is it true? This is Advaita Vedanta. Who am I? We're just coming back to self. Then from here, as we have a sense of this beingness as the self, let's see if we can open up to both. to now awareness from here. And what's it like, this beingness? Is it like the sky? Is it like an ocean? Is it like a dance floor, a theater floor, a space? And then from here, can we be aware of the arisings, the parts? So both the self, the beingness, and the parts. Hey, like, what are your two loudest parts right now? And where, see if you can find like locations for where they show up. Two loudest parts. And then how does your system make sense of this? Like in mine, often it's like a planetarium, and the beingness is the galaxy, is the sky, and the parts are like a constellation, planets. So we can see it all in one view together. Or for others, it's like the stage, the theater, and the parts are actors. For others, it's the infinite hot tub, and the parts are soaking in the warmth of beingness. How does your system do it? We've heard dozens of metaphors. And if there's a sense of blending or identifying with a part, oh, how much longer is this going to go on? Where's Sid going? This is hard to do all of this. Whatever part voice is there, see if you can just zoom out a little bit, zoom out a little bit. It seems helpful, or become aware of the space behind you. Helps open the space as we're aware of the parts, and we're aware of this that they're arising in. In the second view, this is where most of the healing occurs. And just notice this too. If you're aware of two parts right now, two or more parts, notice that it becomes very difficult to suffer from here. Because in this model, in order to suffer, we have to identify with a part. We have to identify, to blend. And if you're aware of two or more simultaneously, it becomes much more difficult for that to happen. So this is our second view. And the third view, third of our primary views, is like, let's see if we can find the bike again. We can go back to the bike of being. And we've just kind of left all the parts behind. We've left all the parts behind, and we're just going back. In India, they call this neti neti. Not this, not that. I'm resting as beingness. This is Advaita. What's it like? Are we peace? Are we resting as peace? Do we have a sense of balance? And notice when we start getting pulled to a part, a thought, oh, how are we done? This is tiring. And then we just come back to the beingness, to the now, to the peace, to the love, to the tenderness, to the connectedness. And the third view is really when we've got some stability here. Something that we can explore is letting it lean, letting it blend with a part. Oh, how much longer is this going to go? I'm kind of tired. And you let it blend, and notice what happens. If we're resting as beingness here, we're riding the bike of being, and we start to blend with a part. This is the intimacy with what's arising in us. And this is where it seems to eventually go with these people on YouTube. But we don't do this. This is just happens. We all know this, because this is when we have often experiences of oneness, bliss, and joy. And it's just this, it's everything, nothing separate from our nature. And then it's like, whoa, I'm starting to feel I'm getting a little lost in this. I'm getting a little lost in these thoughts. And we just come back. Then we just come back straight up. We come back home. And so this is something we can play with, this intimacy, where it's almost like the parts aren't separate. We're being with them, and then we're being as them. All right, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's plenty. We get to shake it all off. Shake it all off. Woo! Ooh, that was a lot. I'd be like, oh my God, Sid, that was so conceptual. That was not useful. That was so conceptual. I'm wanting the usefulness of this. And
I've lost position 1, view 1, by the time we got to position 3. Well, can you repeat the 3? Just 1, 2, 3.
Sure. The first one is just riding the bike. And it's just staying in balance. The second one is the both. As we abide as self, then there gets to be self is the space, it's the ocean, it's the hot tub, it's the dance floor, and we're aware of the parts simultaneously. It's the simultaneous awareness is the second one. And the third one, we just go back to the bike. And then on the bike, we get to notice when it starts to lean and blend that maybe the system can't handle some of that. Maybe there's okayness with the blending with the parts some because there's enough established self here. How's that, Dermot?
I've got it now, I hope.
But let me say this. I would say just ignore all of that. This is just the only way it's helpful. It's like what we're interested in is your system. This is just Sid's little map. And it's your system. And we're more interested in is what is your map? How does your system make sense of this? I just share it because it kind of hits what I've been able to find so far, like most of the spectrum of the spiritual and the healing practices, they can fit into some of that. Any other comments before we keep going around? Because we've only got like 33 minutes and we've got a lot more to hear from people. Any other comments with that? Then Deborah, let's kind of come to closure with what you were sharing. Is there anything else you'd like? There was so much, Deborah, and I wish we had more time. I'd like to make one thing was really interesting for me that you shared, Deborah, when the parts were arising, when the loneliness was there, when the helplessness, there was a sense of a why that came. You were speaking of a why that would come to address it. And it's something, and just to notice where that takes us, the why. And what we prefer in Effortless IFS is a sense of, it's like what's being longed for in the helplessness and the aloneness and the fear. What is it that this precious voice in us, right? It's a precious voice, the fear, the helplessness, the aloneness. It's a precious voice. And it's like, what is it longing for? And for all of us, we were playing with parts. What are our parts longing for? Is it safety? Is it the tenderness that Deborah's been embodying for us? Is it the knowing that Elizabeth's speaking of? Is it the connectedness that Dermot's speaking of? Like the parts, well, you're never alone. There's connectedness here. Is it the okayness that Mary's speaking of? That no matter what's going on, there's an okayness here. There's something that you can trust. Same thing for Debbie, this okayness, this connectedness. What are your parts longing for? Deborah, what would you find? What are your parts? What are they longing for when they wake you up at 4 a.m. in the morning?
I think just attention, to be welcomed, and that however they show up is okay. I learned so much from this. Seriously, I'm so content. Super powerful. Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's all of you are all in me right now. I can feel that. It's so beautiful. Thank you.
Before we go we're going to see who wants to go next with Dermot, Mary, or Debbie. Before we go, just one last thing. Elizabeth had asked us about wanting to welcome more, wanting to celebrate my parts more. And that was really the subtext in that little meditation dive we did. Just a way of just that, of exploring, of abiding as self and welcoming. That was in that as well. Who wants to go next? Mary, Dermot, Debbie.
I could go if.
Yay!
Yeah. Let's see. So, okay, what's the question again?
Oh.
What's up? What happened?
It's really just what's here. What would you like to share? Like Deborah shared about the 4 a.m. and about and Elizabeth shared about the FUD. It's like, what's here for you? What's most present for Debbie, or what's most interesting for her system, or what do you want? What do your parts want? What's here?
Yeah, it can relate and resonate with what's been said, like by Deborah and Elizabeth and everybody actually. And I notice for myself, because I do wake up like, I don't know, my sleep is like I wake up kind of frequently, I think. But like my parts when I wake up and I'm like, in the state, kind of a high alert state. So what they're longing for, and this has really helped me. I don't know if anyone else, what they're longing for is my present. I've left them. They're alone. These parts are like alone and young parts freaked out. And I've left them. So the more, yeah. So when I the more I connect with them, even during the day, they've learned to trust more than I am there. I'm not like, they're not like totally freaked.
Debbie, just at that minute of what you shared, I mean, that could be our theme for our entire group, just what Debbie just shared. Like parts of us that feel like they're alone. Or we don't even have to use the parts language. It could just be us. We could find it here, like when you feel alone. Like, what's that like when you feel alone? Like you're in this all by yourself. You feel alone. And then other times there's a sense, oh, I'm not alone. There's a connectedness here. It's just here. To use Debbie's word, there's a presence. I'm not alone. When we experience that, where Sid experiences that, I'm not alone. There's this presence, there's this connectedness. And what's the same is true for our parts, as Debbie's describing, for her parts that feel alone. And then there's a sense that they experience Debbie being here. They experience presence. And that makes such a difference. And we all find that in our systems. And can we find that can we find that longing? Like Debbie's like, what my parts are longing for is presence. Because that was my question earlier to Deborah and all of us. What are your parts longing for? And in Debbie's, it's very clear. Like, I don't want to be alone. They want this presence. And like now,
and it's not really only presence. My parts are longing for, yes, presence is huge. They want to be heard, I mean, and like, they want, I guess, understanding, kind of, they're wanting, oh, I get it. Yeah. Like, or relief. Like I was thinking with Elizabeth, like my parts, when just like in my system, when you were talking, Elizabeth, would want relief, so yeah, but it is the presence, is the big part.
And so what about that for our parts? They want presence, but wait, if we listen more, there's more. They want to be heard, they want to be seen, they want relief. Can we find that in our systems, that something's wanting, our parts are wanting, or you're wanting to be heard, to be seen, relief? Because the you is there's just these parts, these aspects of us that are wanting this. And then when there's presence here, and it might be more like, the presence might be more like Deborah's, this tenderness, this warmth. It might be more feminine, more maternal, or maybe more masculine. It might be the stillness and its presence that Eckhart Tolle speaks of, this now, his presence. Notice if your parts, that they don't feel received, welcomed in this, they heard and seen.
And I'll share one other thing. With my parts, it's not so much an intellectual, oh, I'm here, but more like this felt sense, oh, that they're feeling me there. It's not just, yeah, and they're
Beautiful.
communicating maybe in a nonverbal way, even.
This is where Debbie is often such a great check and balance on it becoming mental. Like he brings it to the somatic. It's like, no, the parts, they need to feel this. They need to feel the presence. They need to feel the acceptance that they're being seen. What about your system? Do your parts long for that? Like, it's not, I don't want to just be hurt. I don't want to be like, say, oh, I hear you. They want to feel that. They want a sense of being welcomed, received deeply.
Yeah, and in a non often in a non-verbal way, you know, because those are very young
Right? To really
young
feel
parts.
that. And what about that right now for us? As we are this presence, and as you notice your parts, are some of them feeling your presence? And are someone saying, this isn't working. This is just kind of mental. I'm not feeling home here. I'm not feeling acceptance. I'm not feeling welcoming. And can we notice that? And for the parts of us who aren't finding fulfillment now, aren't finding satisfaction, that this isn't working, the parts that this isn't working for, is that okay? Can they be welcomed? Can even that be welcome? The sense of this isn't working. Sid and Debbie, they're just talking about something that doesn't really work for me. Is that okay? Because we all have parts that are like that. I have very mental parts that are like, this is just touchy-feely stuff. I have some parts. And is it okay that those are there? Can they be there just in that? This is nonsense. Can they be welcomed? All right, Debbie, this is a lot. Let me just see how it's going with everybody with this. This was a whole lot. And how's it going? Elizabeth, how's it going with your system with all of this? How you doing?
I'm going to that step back place so that I'm not merged with the part that's really distressed about the blood work, CD57 lymphocyte blood work. So that part is so distressed. I'm stepping back to self and presence so that I can listen to what's going on for it and just say, oh, consciously, so that I'm not merged, identified with that, because that's where there's not going to be suffering if I'm disidentified, and listening to it from presence with curiosity and confidence, saying like, hey, I want to get to know you better.
Remember Elizabeth's word, she was describing this as hell, what was happening in her system. And this part, it's like, gosh, that's reacting. And then can we see the wisdom of what she's describing? I'm just stepping back. I'm going back to self. Because at this moment, it doesn't work to be so intimate with that part, right? You get intimate with it, it's like, whoa, I'm in hell. I'm in FUD. And so it backs up. This is like the first view, the riding the bike. We can find the sense of sanctuary and home. We back up to it. We do that discernment, the wisdom of that. Because it doesn't work if we're all overwhelmed and blended, right? We want to be able to bring this awareness, this presence to our parts.
So I can listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be heard.
Beautiful. Thank you, Elizabeth. How's everybody else doing before we kind of move on to Mary and Dermot? Anything else like to be shared after Debbie's sharing? Just as we start finding our center again. And Debbie, were there any final words you'd like to offer? All good. All right, then we can just shake. Oh, yay. Okay. Then we can just shake it off because we're just playing together. It's like we're playing a sport, cooking, we're dancing. We're just hanging out together, right? And it's because this is intense. It's intense where Debbie just took us. What Elizabeth, this is intense. It's a lot. Woo! And then how are you? How are you? Your precious system, precious you. How are you? What's here? What's the loudest couple parts that are here? What are they arising in? And is there a problem? Is there a problem? Or is it perhaps, oh, this is okay. This is how my precious system is right now. Is everything okay? Or is there a problem? as we notice our parts. And if there's a problem, can we find the part that says that, that believes that, and can that be welcomed as well? Whew, okay, who's gonna go next? Dermot, Mary, who's next?
I'll jump in.
Yay!
Yeah, this is just they're all fabulous, but there's something opening in me with the mother bringing in the mother, and then that I didn't realize that I was still doing sort of either or. I was either in space and presence or I was apart, but this learning to appreciate the parts and what they're trying to do and what they need, and all of that is new. And so that's it's really lovely to be able to see them without criticizing even not criticizing the critic, just realizing that they want the unconditional love and and attention and appreciation for what they're trying to do for me. And it's opening up, and that's really cool. So there's just yeah, it's lovely. That's it. It's just, and it's so subtle. It was one of those things that, it's these blind spots. I mean, they're called blind spots because they're, and then you go, oh, wow, that's, so yeah, excitement and all sorts of things.
What about that? This is what we're hearing in Mary, the either or. Like I'm self, I'm this beingness, I'm this connectedness, I'm this presence, I'm the tenderness, I'm this love, I'm this oneness. Or I'm a part, I'm a sense of want, I'm finite, identified. There was Mary saying there's this either or, and then there's something that's kind of opening up. It's not this either or. Chris, what's that? How's that play in each of us? And Mary, to help us get this that's opening, like you were sharing, one is like the hearing the parts and what they're longing for. What else would you describe this that's opening, this this alternative to the either or?
Well, since you and I had that session a few weeks ago, it was kind of realizing that when you help me see that what they each want and all of that, and then realizing that, and I don't know if this is too story-ish, but it's helped me get here because that's that understanding analytical part, which I realize is not the question. So I'm just going to come back here. Okay.
Oh, pause for just a minute. Understanding analytical part that Mary is also trained as an attorney. Get this understanding analyze part. Can we all find endearment in that? This one that understands and makes sense of. Like Dermot asked, like I said, what are those three views again? The one that understands, makes sense of for us. Can we find endearment for that? How it helps us? How we get to find it? It kind of, well, okay, now it makes sense. We find endearment for that in Mary. And we find the same in our systems for this precious part. It could be so useful. All right, back to you, Mary.
Okay, so I'm trying to remember what the question was, but it's just this appreciation and gratitude and just okayness that these parts have been as trouble as they've been all along, and that, seeing that they were doing the best they could and they had my best interest at heart. And now I can just say, you're okay, with real sincerity. I guess it's becoming more actual experience and less theory. It's being my felt sense of, wow, they really are okay. And they can then feel that they're okay because it's, symbiotic.
They can also feel that they are okay. For all of us, as we hear that, can we really find that in our own system? Parts that be like, what do you mean? I'm okay just the way I am? I'm okay just the way I am? And when I'm really scared and alone and overwhelmed and I don't like this medical situation, I really don't like it. I feel helpless. I feel despair. There's a sense of acceptance, okayness just as we are. Can our desperate parts, can they taste that possibility of okayness, even in the contraction, in the hell, in the despair? Anything else you'd like to do in bringing this together for us, Mary, before we go to Dermot?
I'm trying to, it's hard to articulate, but that as I'm seeing that they have my best interest at heart, that then that makes me feel okay with them. And then they kind of feel that they're being accepted. And then that imbues them, that they get to kind of soak it up. And so it's sort of a loop, if that makes sense. A
Being that
good
they
loop as
have,
opposed to a hell spiral.
yeah. Sounds like some of it just starts with seeing that, wow, the parts have my best interest, even when they're like, doesn't seem that way, but there's something that's seeing they have my best interest at heart. That for all of us. And when when beingness, when this fulfillment that we are, sees parts, how does it see them? Does it include a flavor of what Mary's pointing to, the seeing that, wow, doing their best. They have my interest at heart. This love for them, just the way they are.
And that
Final words? Yeah.
when I'm with them, and like the mother part that's giving them this unconditional love, there. Let me think. From their perspective, like, without identifying, but seeing it like you would a child who's there saying, I'm so scared. And you can, I can see that, oh, I know you're scared and it's okay. And I'm here. And so it's not blending. It's lovely to have the compassion without blending. So I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah.
How's this for everyone? I know we're getting tired, we're towards the end, but what are you able to receive from Mary? This, we don't want to miss the gifts, these beautiful gifts. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. Well, that was a lot. Let's kind of go, okay, in our dance, we get to flow because we got Dermot's going to take us someplace together, and we want to be ready. We want to be like buckled back in and ready for that. Like, oh, yeah, exactly. Go play with the hair. This is our grand finale to Dermot. And just before we go there, just notice, how are you? How am I? Oh, there's some lightness, there's some flow, but oh God, I'm a little tired. I need something. Just notice the parts that are here. And is it okay that these parts are here? Like, God, how can I make sense of all this? There's so much today. How am I going to make sense of this? Am I going to remember it? Blah, blah, blah. It's like all of that, all of our parts that are here for us. And then there's the peace that's here. And there's the connectedness, the maternal tenderness, the okayness, the knowing of oneness. the connection. Dermot, you're up. Where you got for us?
All right. Well, yeah. So, obviously, many parts around. I'm going to mention a couple, but they're not the ones I want to focus on. So, obviously, there's a part of this feeling rather exposed because it's the first time I've been in this situation in this group, and yeah. So, and we're talking about very personal stuff, and I'm okay with that. I can do that, but it's still, it's a new group. And,
How about let's just pause for that in a moment. The part that feels exposed, like it's from here. Gosh, what we're talking about, it's very intimate. The sense of being exposed. And notice, how do we feel towards that part of Dermot that he's described? Is there endearment towards that part? Like, gosh, I know that. I can so relate. It's my first time here. Wow. And then the part in us that would have the same kind of concern, can we find that would resonate with that? And can we also find an endearment towards our part? Back to you, Dermot.
so the parts I'm sort of would like to bring in are, to me, quotes the more difficult ones for me, such as, well, I mean, one is simply the part, the chattering part that keeps on thinking and yeah, reflecting, criticizing, worrying. Yeah, worrying. Let's say the worrying part that's going on all the time. And stopping me being present in being. And then the other part, because yeah, I mean, obviously I'm with the sort of needy child parts, but one of the ones that causes me problems is the controlling part that tries to control people, manipulate people to get what I want. Can take me over, and in my view, mess things up in relationships, etc. So,
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's present here at this moment, but it's a part that is around for me a lot.
Oh, so how about that? How about that for all of these two parts that Dermot's pointing to? This, well, I'm kind of getting this, the one that's the chattering part, that's kind of criticizing and worrying. Like, oh, there's more you need to do. There's this and that. It's kind of always this. It's just this unending to-do list. This, that. Got to do it right. Got to do this. And so, for all of us, where do we hear that part? Where do we hear that voice? That this never-ending to-do list, never-ending. Got to change something. Got to do something differently. Concern. Where do we hear it? Is it in our head? Is it a contraction in our body? Is it outside of us? It's like, oh, we got this and this and this and this. Where do we find that? And then the second part Dermot's talked about is called it like a needy young part, needy child part. And first, I'm hearing two there. I'm hearing like the need, like the vulnerability, the neediness, the sense of want, and it's like it could be of it when we heard Dermot say needy child. How does that resonate in our system? Needy child. Can we all find this, right? And we might have a part saying that, my God, what do you mean a needy child? You're not 10 years old. You're not 5 years old. We might have one that kind of makes it wrong to have a young, vulnerable partner system. And we can notice that as well. And then Dermot pointed to one that was kind of a controlling part, one that was trying to make things okay. Controlling part, need to control this, need to control that. And often we have these, like, when we have vulnerabilities, we often call them exiles in IFS, this vulnerability. Then we have protectors that come and try to make things better, and controlling is a primary way we do that. And we all relate to that with our vulnerability, a sense of a controlling part that comes up that tries to kind of manage things for us, tries to get control of situations. How's this going, Dermot? What are you finding?
Yeah, that's it's a good reflection of what goes on for me. Yeah, I mean, it's yeah,
Perfect. Well, what about that? What about this? The clarity. Can we all appreciate the clarity that Dermot has in describing this? I've got these chattering parts. They're always criticizing, worrying. If we could, and then I've got the needy child, and I've got this controlling. And this is one of the gifts of just classic IFS, the very basics of IFS. It's the idea of being able to kind of name them, name what's here. Because as we're aware of them, we kind of make them objects, to be aware of them. But notice if we're aware of them, we're not coming from them. We're not aware as them. We're aware of them. And then we get to, it's kind of like what Elizabeth was doing when she was backing up, to be aware of them. And just you're being able to describe it the way you did, Dermot. There's awareness of the parts. And the idea is that gives us some freedom, because we get to be this, get to have some space for self, for being. It's just like you were saying, these parts can stop you from being present and from being. And in IFS terms, that's because we blend with them, we identify with them. And as you're aware of them and speaking of them, we have space. And we have space, and we can be like, oh, there's some space here. I'm aware of my parts. Anything else you'd like to share with that, Dermot? That was a lot.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm grateful for that. Obviously, for example, my controlling part, when it takes me over, I do not have space around it. It's in control. It is literally in control, and I am trying to control, and that's that's not a happy place for me to be. But that's where I end up.
You can all relate to that, right? And then at the same time, when fear is here, when helplessness is here, when aloneness is here, when despair is here, when there's a sense of hell, sometimes it is met by self. Sometimes it is met by maternal love and tenderness and awareness and kindness. But often we have parts that come in that are like, hey, this is too much. We gotta deal with this. We gotta get some control. And I want to say, isn't that awesome that we have controlling parts that come in that kind of manage things, that it can make things okay? Isn't that awesome? We've only got like 2 minutes left, and how are we doing? Anything that's wanting to be shared? And in my heart, also goes to Elizabeth, with how she started us off with what's happening in her system, with the hell that's been opening. And Elizabeth, how's it going there?
Well, I just, I love your attitude that flips everything on its head. Like, well, isn't it great we have these controlling parts that come in and help us? How would you say that for parts that are like sunk in a dark fear? The parts that are just going down the spiral of fear, and how would you say, isn't that wonderful? These, like, what would Sid say? Isn't it wonderful, these parts going down the dark spiral of fear here? I mean, it doesn't sound the same as saying, oh, aren't these controller parts wonderful that come in and help us?
Yeah. Well, let's ask everybody, as we hear Elizabeth speak of parts that are going into the depths of despair, they're going into this hell, that are going into this overwhelm and aloneness. What do we say about them? What do those evoke in us?
I certainly wouldn't say, isn't to my parts, they'd be upset. Isn't this wonderful? They would,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean,
What
my
does that
parts would,
evoke, Debbie, when you hear about that part, that Elizabeth, the ones that are going into the despair, the darkness, that feel trapped and lost in that and overwhelmed and there's no way out? What does that evoke in you towards them?
um, when Elizabeth, when you shared like the stepping back a bit, so those totally terrified parts feel your presence. Anyhow, that resonated with me quite a bit.
Yeah.
But to say Isn't that wonderful? No.
Yeah.
That
Isn't
would
it
be very
like
disturbing.
what does it bring over? Like in my system, there is just such love and care for these parts. And there's such understanding of the pain they're in. And there's Deborah's word, there's such a tenderness and care. It's like
Mhm.
these young parts being caught in this. And there's understanding. What any other words come for us for anybody with that, with Elizabeth's part?
Compassion.
Yeah.
Teachers for me, because they're teaching me how to love, how to I guess to be with them. They're the ones that are showing me how to be aware of them, how to, I don't know if that makes sense, but anyway.
And it's like I'm imagining some of us and some of our older parts, there's so much compassion for these young aspects of us that are caught in the FUD, caught in the despair, the darkness, the spiraling. There's a sense of, okay, gosh, if I could change places with those parts, those young parts, I would do that. We want, there's such a wanting to help, there's such wanting to relieve the suffering, the despair of the parts. So no, I would never want to say, oh, isn't that great? You're feeling terrified. Yay. It would be different.
But yet I get the most empowerment shift and disidentification when you do bring that, like, hey, celebrate this part. Even if I know it's a hurting, distressed part, it doesn't feel callous. It feels very disidentifying and puts this power back in self in present.
Yes. Well, that might come. You might glimpse this in the depth of this oneness that you describe, in the depth of this radical acceptance. There might be some glimpsing of, wow, it's even okay that there are parts that are suffering, but it sounds callous. So it doesn't, it's like maybe we can touch that because ultimately that's where this goes, right? We see the beauty of everything that arises in us, just as it is. But we would never say that in the pain of these parts that are in the despair. We would just love them, care for them. Kind of out of time. Is that a hand up, Mary? Any kind of final words from anybody? And Elizabeth, I can, if you want to stay on a few minutes, I'm available. We can just kind of, because this is a lot. So I just want to say in closing, look what we did today. Look what we did together. You see, like if you try to even think about all the places we went, all the qualities of self and all the expressions of parts, precious expressions from the six of us together. And lastly, what made this? It wasn't like it wasn't me talking about it. It was your symptoms. It was your part. It was what you were sharing. And we just dove in with you. I just want to appreciate just the preciousness of your system and thank you for sharing and being here. I love being with you. There's always IFS non-dual community. We're talking about this all the time. If you want to do it on Facebook, anything comes up, just post it there or comment and be a part of this. And hope to see you soon. Thanks for being here.
Thank
Such a
you. Thanks,
pleasure.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Well,
Bye.
woo!
I really appreciate your thank you, Sid. Thank you so much. You're a wonderful teacher for me because I do need that like enthusiasm. Like I'm not a Rupert Spira. I can't do a teacher who's in a monotone. I need the, the enthusiasm and the inspiration. And I love it when in the past I've shared some like shameful exile part and you're like, can't we just love this part? And it's like, so I love how you can turn the inner critic, whatever the inner critic is saying, on its head. And I was like, and then I can practice that on my own.
You shared a lot today with the FUD, the hell, the despair, the hopelessness. I'm also just wanting, the gentleness. The idea is that this gets to be a really gentle container that we get to hold each other in, the six of us today, and caring for each other and caring for each other's parts and having endearment towards each other's parts and acceptance and appreciation. And how you sharing as you did, we were all going there with you. We were finding not only the endearment towards your parts, but you were helping us go there in our own systems. You took us in today into the depths of this. And I'm just wanting to check and make sure your system is feeling all right with this, that you're not having like your part, there's a lot to go in, and that your parts are it's doing all right, that it's feeling okay and coming out.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm furthering my training and focusing, so I'm working my way with this part with compassion and confidence listening. That's not an instant fix or anything. Sometimes there can be just, yes, so thank you for checking on me, and the part. And I've really loved how you've role modeled for me not just the compassion, but how we can be like that cheerleading energy for a part, especially when inner critic is like, that is such a disidentification shift in consciousness that I can practice. More so when there's a shame part or a exile that's getting shamed. And even if it's just something like with this scared part, of course, we don't want to say, yay, you're feeling shitty. But like, even if I could just, like, from Rumi's guest house, say, like, you come right on in and we've got the best suite for you while we work through, like, I don't
Yeah.
know, something about being a cheerleader for the parts is really wow, it really, when I see you model that, I can practice it. So sorry if I'm just repeating myself,
Awesome.
but I don't know how to be a cheerleader for a really part that's in a lot of distress yet.
I love what you shared with the Rumi's guest house. Oh, welcome. Welcome. You're being held here. You're being cared for. You're being seen. See you. Welcome home. Your pain is seen, felt. It's welcomed here. It's not too much. There's no problem here.
And there's no problem if, again, the content is very triggering. There's no problem if the CD57 T cell lymphocytes is gotten lower. There's no problem, right?
Well, you have parts that are going to find a problem, right? Like, oh gosh, I don't want to deal with this. This is horrible. Pain. I have to do this, that. Oh, I don't like feeling this way.
Hopeless. There's
Hopefully,
nothing I can do.
right. But we can notice those as the parts in the guest house, and they get to be heard. The ones that are just the hopelessness. This is horrible. This is horrible. I don't want this. And then you have the host, the guest, the welcome, the space of the house, the self. Just hear you. I understand. There's
Yeah.
love for that. The space of this oneness, this radical acceptance, this presence.
I am just aware with my focusing that compassion, which is the magic ingredient you can never have too much of, it can sometimes to a part feel like sympathy and not empowering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I want to say something empowering to this part, like,
I'd like to suggest it's looking at if there are any looking at this. It's like an IFS. It's a classic IFS question. It's like they ask, how do you feel towards that part? The reason we do that is we get to find if there are any parts that are like, oh, I want to help this part. Even wanting to help it is a part. I want to
Guilty as
relieve it,
charged. Thank
you know.
you.
And then the parts can generally feel that's there, as
Mm.
compared with the clarity of the space of self, this oneness, this presence, this radical acceptance.
Yes. Bingo. You hit the mark. Thank you.
Yeah.
That part can block the process of me being with what is, the part that
Yeah.
wants to help. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. And Elizabeth, then it's also okay. Like then we get to dance again. It's like, okay, here we are. That's all right. That was fun. That was a lot. And and then because you can tell how it happens. I could, how it opens, how the clarities, the discernments, they just kind of come on their own, and it just comes, and it's like we don't have to we get to be light. We get to play. We get to be open. Follow, If not, it gets so exhausting, doesn't it? It gets so exhausting.
It just gets so demoralizing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still stuck a little bit in the content.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate thank you for going over and staying on the phone with me. And
Oh God, you just took us. You took us to such a beautiful place today. And Elizabeth, I am I'm with my parents in Memphis right now, but
okay.
I might have, if at some point it would be helpful, because I'm trying. I like I told you, I'm collecting one-on-one samples of EIFS, and if there's ever a time where this would be interesting for you to just, because it's what you share is just, it touches all the levels for people as samples of this. If you'd ever like to do it, just shoot me an email in the next couple of weeks.
I would. I absolutely I would. I know you're busy and you have your family commitments and your job and your service you offer on top of that, but I would it's a standing. I would love to anytime when you have the time.
Great. 2 questions. What would you shoot me the best way to communicate, if it's via text or Facebook message, where I could, because sometimes it's like day of or next day, and it's like to be able to just
Okay.
get right through to you. One, and then
Okay.
2, what type of availability do you have for time-wise in your life generally?
I'm very flexible because I'm on out of work on disability right now.
Okay, we'll make it happen then.
I just go to bed really early.
Got it. What time zone are you, Elizabeth?
I'm same as you.
Same as me. There we go. All right. To be continued.
Thank you. I am so grateful to you and all my mentors, and watch out for tornadoes. Please be safe.
Yes, and it's so kind what you say, but for me, Elizabeth, you and I are friends exploring together, and it's such a joy diving in with you. And I'll see you later.
Thank you. Gasho, gasho.
Bye.
Bye.